How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Bite-Sized MTG. I'm Zach, also known as Snack on Discord. Today, I just want to do a short and sweet tournament breakdown for you, going over my last two events that I was lucky enough to take down. So the first event we're going to talk about is the Power Card Rumble 3, hosted by my good friend Wayne, Blade of Boros. It's also co-hosted by Amped Gaming. They're an awesome YouTube channel down here in California, so if you get a chance, make sure to go check them out. There's actually a video we did recently where I did a gameplay episode with them. So if you get a chance, I'd highly recommend subscribing to them. So let's break this down first by just checking out the lists I brought to this event. So this is my take on Rograk Thrasios. Called it Moonfolk Tribal, just because we have our favorite little creature over here in a Boro Breeze Caller. This is Max Sternberg or Wounded Satellites list with one adjustment. I cut the One Ring for Magus of the Candelabra. I just really like Candelabra effects. I think they're incredibly powerful, and I often found myself not really wanting to get the One Ring. I just wanted to prioritize Thrasios activations. Whether that's correct or not totally sure, but the list did win, so let's break it down. I'm not going to get super into a deck tech on Rog Thras right now. I'd like to leave that to the people who have been really pioneering this deck and playing it a lot, but if you're curious about that and you want to have me do a breakdown, let me know in the comments down below. More than happy to talk about my experience playing the deck aside from just this tournament. Let's jump into round one. This was a draw, and it's never fun to start off tournaments on losses or draws just because you know you're gonna have to win in later rounds. It's always nice to get a win up front just because you have a little more confidence going into your later rounds, as well as better pairing. You get paired up into winner pods a little bit more often, and you don't get stuck in the Swiss swamps. So this round was me in first seat, Sylvie Sherman on Dargo Timna in second seat, Jeremy Davis on Sisse in third seat, and Ken Shun on Elsha in fourth seat. Going into this pod, I already knew it was going to be a difficult game to win. I've talked about Jeremy a lot. He is just a phenomenal Magic player and the best Sisse player I've ever played against. Sylvie is a really strong Mardu player. She plays Dihada. She's played a couple other lists. I don't know of all of them, but she's got into Dargo Timna and has just been killing it. You'll see she's a part of the next tournament as well. This game basically just evolved into a draw because we were going through trying to stop Sylvie. I started establishing a board presence. Jeremy was just sitting on like so much interaction, and Ken was sitting on a Ristic Study. So I didn't really have a great chance to push in this game. I attempted it right before time, and they had enough to stop me, so we ended up just drawing this game. Round two is also a draw. Back-to-back draws feels terrible. This is a 50-person event, and the bubbles do range a little bit. And when I say bubble, I mean how many points it's going to take to get you into top 16 or top 10 in this case. But usually it's about 2 wins, you're pretty locked. A win and 3 draws is like probably where the bubble's sitting, and then a win and 2 draws and a loss is probably not good enough, and we'll see in standings just how that panned out. But this game was against Kaya Wilson on Zur in first seat. I was on second seat. Ty was on Narset in third seat, 6-mana Narset, and then Brandon was on Malcolm Tana, so Tropical Pirates, in fourth seat. This game was really interesting. Kaya had a pretty good start. I believe she developed some creature engines like a Lotho and an Esper early. I had either a turn 1 or a turn 2 Ristic Study. Ty had an early Fish, and Brandon unfortunately had to mull low and was kind of figuring out his game plan throughout the game. This game was just a mid-range slog. Everyone had draw engines, and so everyone had interaction for everything. There was not a lot of good opportunities to push, and again, when I tried to push, a draw was forced on me because there was enough interaction to stop me, basically. And at this point, I was feeling a little down just because we had been playing, and starting with 2 draws feels terrible. The deck was just feeling like it couldn't capitalize, and I was trying to figure out the play pattern still, just because I'm not an expert on this deck. I really wanted to stress test it at this event and see how powerful I thought it was. So this point of the day, I was not super high on it, but you know, we'll see as we keep going that things got better. Round 3 was a win. So first win of the day is great. First seat is Rain on Zuladok, colorless Eldrazi commander. We have Big Pokeballs, which is a hilarious name, on Kinnan. And then we had Peyton, who I believe was on a red-green commander that makes your artifacts tap for mana or exile cards off the top Forget the name of it, but if you know, please let me know in the comments down below. This game was an interesting one. It was definitely a little bit of like, I kept a pretty, I would say, mid-hand, something that just got Thrasios out, got a Cradle at some point, and had a Magus of the Candelabra. Rain on Zul'Adok was kind of developing their plan, which is just slamming colorless pieces to ramp into Zul'Adok and to start cascading. They didn't get quite into that, which was really lucky for us because it's really hard to stop that. And then Big Pokeballs was doing the Kinnan thing. So just developing their mana. Luckily, they didn't have too many powerful pushes. At one point, they did get a Hullbreaker Horror on the turn I won, and that was something I had to work through and work around. And then Peyton was just really developing this really cool engine of all these random artifacts that were tapping for mana and exiling cards and generating really cool advantage, honestly, with some linchpin stacks pieces. So as we navigate turns, I get to the point where I have a decent amount of mana and I'm able to set up some tutor chains. I have like 3 pieces of interaction in my hand. I have a Fierce, a Swat, and a Pact or a Force of Will. And I have to play around this Hullbreaker Horror and a known Beseiju. I also have a Spellskite on board, so that's sort of protecting my board a bit. It was a really strong card in this game, but we get to the point where the Hullbreaker, like I put my creature tutor on the stack, they try and counter with the Hullbreaker trigger, they try and get rid of my Spellskite. I hold priority, I counter it back. Again, they fight back with the Hullbreaker trigger trying to bounce the Spellskite, and I believe I swat I think I let that happen and I swat the Beseiju to something else that was problematic on board that it was perhaps stopping me. I don't totally remember, but worked out for me. I ended up getting the win there just with the Ewit, Snap, Spelt Seeker line. So that was a great way to have some leverage in this tournament and to start putting points on the board to get me into top cut. Round 4 was a draw. At this point, we'd kind of figured that the bubble was around 8. 7 was a maybe, but 8 was looking pretty good. There was just a lot of draws today. And so we had an ID this round. It was Albert, a good buddy of mine, on Rogsai. I was in second seat. Lucas is a awesome, I'm forgetting the name of the commander, Tulane, Hullen, whatever way you call it or talk about it. But Tulane is a super cool creature deck. It's in Bant, and it operates in a very different access than a lot of decks generally do. It does utilize Cradle, but it also has just awesome bounce effects that can let you reuse cards like Eternal Witness. Certain key pieces you can like bounce and replay, and it has really cool land synergies. And then Dylan was on Rogsai as well. So this pod to me was like a great time to draw. Having double Rogsai in your pod is horrible for any deck that's not Rogsai. Just because they advantage each other so much by pushing early and having interaction be used. We played this game out for fun, and multiple times throughout the game, it was clear that this would have been a draw anyways, where someone had interaction, but the next person would be able to win after them. So that ended up going well, and we drew this round. Going into top 10, we ended up cutting into top 10 instead of top 16. We do this semi-often. I'm not sure if it's better or worse from like a tournament perspective. I just know that it's going to decrease the amount of time you're there just because there's going to be less top 16 pods that are going on at the same time and taking a while. And these were timed rounds. So the person in first seat who's still alive would end up moving on. Because I only had 8 points at this point, I was not in first, I was in third. And so I had to be pretty cautious of how I was doing things. So our first seat is Chad on Corvold, which is awesome. Super cool to see Corvold getting some results now and pushing and being able to be a part of the meta. This was a lands build, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the game once we get into it, but it was doing some really cool stuff. Big Pokeballs, who I played earlier in the day in Swiss, was on Kinnan. I'm in third seat, and then Mason Bump, another buddy of mine who is a local at my store, TC's Rockets, was playing Quark Timna, which is essentially like this really grindy Mardu build that's able to leverage Quark and double tutor and double ritual and do, kind of broken Quark stuff while still having Timna as a backup plan. He calls it the better TNK. This game was one where I had to mold pretty low. I ended up keeping like a Fairy Mastermind, a Clone, some stable mana, and a Flare to interact with win attempts. And this is a game where I actually had a pregame conversation with Big Pokeballs because we're the 2 blue players, and I said, hey, this Mardu deck and Corvold are probably going to go faster than us, and so I'm going to be prioritizing more interaction and less greediness in my hands. And I'm going to ask if you could try and do the same, just because I think both of our decks function better the longer the game goes. And that's just something that I do every now and then to try and create scenarios and pods where you're more advantageous and you're not going to lose early to these decks that have such high explosivity. The game kind of develops into a bit more mid-range than I thought it was going to be, which is great for me. The Corvold player develops pretty quickly. They end up getting an Ice Till Explorer and are just like making so much mana and able to kind of like mill and dig through their deck a bit using that. Big Pokeballs has an early attempt with Kinnan where he gets a quick Kinnan out and has a Moonsilver Key to get a Basalt. So obviously the pregame conversation did not work, which is totally fine. Like if you see turbo hands and you think you can go faster, you should keep those if you think you'll be able to get there. But we were able to stop him. And then Mason has a more mid-rangey Tymna plan going on. So that's awesome for me too, just because I want to grind. We get to a situation where we're able to kill Kinnan and then get a Bowmaster out. At this point in the game, I have the Bowmaster lands, we ping Kinnan, and then before the Tymna draw, Big Pokeballs kills the Bowmaster with like a Pongify. I have the Flare at this point, but Mason shows me he's just on Reanimate. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to let him reanimate the Bowmaster. I made a deal with him saying, hey, I'm fine with you having a Bowmaster. I think it's going to control the board well, but I would like to have some Bowmaster immunity because I can flare your Reanimate and then I'll have the Bowmaster and your plan goes to shit because you're not going to be able to progress your Tymna game plan and then I can just control the board because I had a clone of Tymna at this point. So he was like, all right, that's fine. He worked with me and we made that deal. The Bowmaster comes back, Kinnan dies, and now Corvold is increasingly getting more and more scary. They're able to, in this turn cycle, kind of ramp into a more powerful, like, Corvold. I don't exactly know what they have, but it was the Ice Till Explorer that was putting in work. Oh, Squandered Resources. So the Squandered Resources plus Ice Till was basically letting them sack their lands, replay them from the yard, generate a ton of value. They weren't quite able to get to a Corvold, but they tutored in this turn, and we knew that if they had another turn, they would pretty much win. Big Pokeballs, on the other hand, was sitting on a creature tutor that Mason had basically asked to see because we were like, oh, he's ready to go again. Like, Kinnan is good to go. The Moonsilver Key is still there. And Mason ends up silencing him on his turn. And I agree, I won't win. At this point, I've drawn enough cards. I draw cards that would let me win. I have Cradle on board, and I had a Breeze Collar in hand, and I probably could have just pushed there, but I agreed to the deal. I developed a Seedborn Muse, which is still a very powerful engine, but one that would require me to get through all 3 turns and able for me to actually close the game. Mason draws a couple cards, and we make some deals about the Seedborn, saying like, I will only use it to find answers. I won't use it to progress that much. Corvold, I have to stop like 3 different times on their turn. I have to counter the Corvold. I have to, I think, Besage their Shifting Woodlands so that they can't just make it a Corvold. It was to the point where it was getting pretty scary. So I luckily drew into all the correct pieces of interaction there. And then we go to Big Pokeball's turn, and he has a little bit of a push, but at this point I've drawn the interaction to stop him, get back to my turn, and be able to close out the game. So that was the top 10. Then we go into top 4, and this was a slog. It was a really good game, but it was a slog. Kaya Wilson, someone else who had played in Swiss on Zur in Seat 1. Aaron Joseph, a really good Blue Farm player and buddy of mine from LA in Seat 2. Dylan, the Rogside player who I'd drawn the game with earlier in Swiss, is in Seat 3, and then I'm in Seat 4. This is another time finals pod, so Seat 1 will win if we go to time, and if they're still alive. If they're not, Seat 2. So I do not want this game to go to time. I would like to progress this game into a win, because if it goes to time, I'm losing. And the game just develops very value engine based. Early Ristics from all 3 of the players. I'm just developing my Thrasios board. Around turn 3-ish, people start pushing. So Kaya, I think at this point, has either 1 or 2 Ristic studies. And Aaron tries to Naz. We all interact. They obviously have more interaction than I do because I don't have my value engine really on board yet. Like, I've developed a Thrasios and a double Biomancer familiars, but I don't have a Cradle yet, and I don't have that much mana. So we kind of stop him, and then we go to Dylan. He tries to push because he's Rockside and he needs to win the game before it gets too bogged down. We stop him. I make a deal again that I will not win on my turn if Aaron interacts because he only has an MBT to stop Dylan completely. We go to my turn. My Urza Saga ticks up to 3. I crack it for a map. I get a Cradle. And then the only spell I play that turn is a Boro Breeze Collar. At this point, I've already won this game just because I have so much overwhelming value. I have the Cradle that's going to tap for about 6. I have 3 other lands. I have the double Biomancers. I have the Breeze Collar, Thrasios, and Rog on board, which means that my Breeze Collar activations cost 1 mana, my Thrasios activations cost 1 mana, and I can basically activate Thrasios, hunt for lands, untap my Cradle with Breeze Caller, and just interact over the top. I don't push in my turn. I made a deal that I was going to give Aaron the ability to see all the Necro cards that he wants. He had deployed a Necro earlier. You can see probably 20 cards. Kai also had a huge grip in her hand with the double Rhystic Studies and the Scroll Rack that she had deployed. And so we go into Aaron's turn. He Necros for a bunch. First spell he casts is a Cabal Ritual, triggers the Rhystic Study. I just hold priority. I'm saying, all right, I'm going to activate Thrasios, put a land into play, bounce with the Breeze Caller, untap my Cradle. And I do this a couple times, and then they see the writing on the wall that any spell they cast, I'll just respond with another Thrasios activation or Breeze Caller activation. So everything will get buried. No triggers are going to resolve for the Rhystic Study. I am able to pretty much just win on top of anything that happens. So that was a top 4 game, and that's how I won that first tournament on Rockthras. Overall, the deck felt very strong when it was allowed to do its thing. It's definitely a snowball deck that if you don't deal with early, it will just bury you. And it plays the sitting back game really, really well, where it just hides behind Thrasios, doesn't do much, and draws cards and interacts. So that was the first tournament. Great to have a win there. My first power card win. I've done historically pretty poorly at these tournaments, so it was great to walk away with a win on Rockthras. Let's go into the next tournament. So this is Cash Cards Unlimited, a cEDH event. This is a event run by Cassius Marsh in his store Cash Cards Unlimited. This was kind of a funny story, but I had finished a bronze event the day before at Rockets, and I was hanging out with Albert, the guy who was playing Rogsai in this previous tournament, and I was like looking for tournaments that were going on just because, you know, we wanted to see if there's anything between now and Fishbowl that we could play in. And we ended up seeing this happening the next day in LA. For those of you who don't know, LA's huge, and so the drive from San Diego there can be anywhere from an hour and a half-ish to like 2.5 to 3 hours. And this tournament was held in Thousand Oaks. So it was about a 2.5-hour drive, and it ended up not being that big of a tournament. But the prizing was pretty good, and we just wanted to go up and have some fun and just see how it went and get to hang out with all the LA folks that are so awesome. So we ended up driving up that night after bronze event at Rockets, staying at a friend's house who was away, who let us just crash there, and then driving in the morning up to this tournament. We get there. We were hoping it would be a silver, but it just didn't quite hit that number. So I was like, that's okay. We can just play and see how it goes. So let's hop into rounds real quick. Round 1 was a draw. Again, drawing tournaments or drawing games in round 1, not my favorite thing to do, but it's Blake Stewart on Yuriko, Robert Hager on, getting the commander's name, but it's some Jun commander. It's a spacecraft from the newer set that just came out. I'm in third seat. For this tournament, I played Blue Farm. Again, we can go into my list a little bit more in depth, but I'm going to save that for a later video. The things of note in this tournament that I added in were Flameskull Celebrant / Revel in Silence, Stormkilling Artist. Let's see what else. I'm trying Cyclonic Rift over into the Floodmaw, and then I also added Pyroblast as another interactive slot. And then I cut a land. So I cut Mistrise Village, chilling at 26 lands right now. Overall, these changes actually were pretty good. I felt like they were really strong, and they helped me win this tournament. But again, I'll dive into that in more depth in a later video if that's something that everyone's interested in hearing about. So anyway, 4th seed is Lucas, again, that Tulane player from earlier. So this game, I have to mull to 3. This is never a good spot to be in cEDH. You do not want to be operating on that low of resources, but it is what it is, and you have to take what you're given. So I mull to a Volcanic Island, a Gemstone Caverns, a Mnemonic Betrayal, and an Imperial Seal. And the plan is just pitch the meme bet to my Gemstone Caverns, turn 1, tutor for a fish or an Esper Sentinel, whatever my draw ends up being that's going to advantage me more, and then just chill on that and hope that I can dig myself out. Blake has a turn 1 Bowmaster, which thank God I didn't get the Esper, I got the fish, and just starts blowing out the board. And he's in a super dominant position this whole game. The Jund player at some point is able to remove the Bowmaster. I'm just sitting on the fish hoping I draw cards that were going to get me back into this game. I drew like 1 land, and I was on 2 lands for most of the game. Lucas's board was just getting wiped over and over by the Bowmaster, and if you don't know, Tulane draws cards, so it's a forced draw. The Bowmaster is just going to trigger. We're all losing life to Yuriko. It's like kind of a dire situation. I'm not drawing any answers that I really see. We get to a point where I'm able to Mystical Tutor on end step for a Dark Ritual, and I have like a Ranger Captain in hand, so the thought process is, I have Ranger Captain, Naws, and a Underworld Breach, and I can't quite set up the mana to Naws, and I'm also at a relatively low life total, but I think I can land this Ranger Captain, get a Mockingbird to get rid of the Bowmaster, and then if I draw the right cards, be able to Naws or Breach with protection with the Ranger. So Go around the turn cycle. Yuriko ends up hitting us just for one trigger, and they flip the 15 drop, and I go from like 20 life to 15 or to 5, like out of nowhere. And I'm like, well, the Nas plan is completely done. And get to me. I crack the Ranger Captain because I can cast the Breach and I can kind of dig with a Tainted Pact. And if I hit an LED early before other combo pieces, I'll be able to get to a Brain Freeze and win through that means. And like the first 2 cards I hit are Thassa's Oracle and Brain Freeze. My meme bet's already gone. It's a relatively low resource breach just because I don't have a lot of mana and I don't have that many cards in the bin. And so I figure the best thing I can do is navigate this game to a draw. I get the Bowmaster back from I get the Mockingbird back from the graveyard. I make it a Bowmaster, kill the Yuriko's Bowmaster. I think they had 2 at this point, and we essentially just navigate this game to a draw. But again, not ideal, but that's how it goes. Round 2 is a win. This is with Wayne on Zerda in first seat, Hayden on Grand Arbiter Augustin the Fourth. Crazy card to be playing, but so cool. Second seat, I'm in third seat on Farm, and then Rain is on Zul'Adok again. This is not a great game, not a great pod for me. Wayne's deck stacks really, really well, and it kills Blue Farm. Hayden is obviously on Azorius stacks, and he's a 60-card player who knows how to play it well. He's just getting into cEDH, but he was a pretty strong player. And then Rain on Zul'Adok is also not really going to be that interactive with the stacks pieces. They're just going to slam their own pieces that are really hard to deal with. And that's kind of how this game progresses. I'm able to land an early Esper Sentinel into a Tataru Taru, and that's what really carried me this game. We get to a point where Rain has been developing their Zul'Adok plan, Wayne is developing the Zerda plan. They get to a point where they can almost make infinite mana if they cast Zerda, but the Grand Arbiter is holding them back, so they're like a pip short. And I show him counter magic that will be able to stop him. At this point, I also have a Stormkill Artist, so that was one of the cards that I included. Put in work this game. We go to my turn. I have a glut of mana from the Tataru Taru because other players have Esper Sentinels. I've been drawing cards, I've been making mana, and I feel like I'm in a good spot to push. There's still the Grand Arbiter on board, and I know Wayne has interaction because he always has it. Plus, he has a lot of untapped mana to use with his Mirage Mirror that he landed. And he can turn that into anything on board. So I basically cast Revel in Silence in my upkeep because I have a Vamp Tutor that I can get a Thoracle with a Tainted Pact in my hand. I don't generally like going for raw Thoracle lines, but I just couldn't go through a Breach line with the Grand Arbiter in play. I'd have to tutor too many pieces. Obviously, Brain Freeze with Stormkill Artist is really good, but I just wanted to decrease the variables and see if I could resolve my silence and then go from there. So all my spells cost 1 more, but my Stormkill is refunding my instants and sorceries by a treasure. So I cast Revel in Silence, another card I added. That gets fought over a little bit. At some point, Wayne tries to make his Mirage Mirror into a Grand Arbiter. I respond by Odawaring the Grand Arbiter, so he has to respond again, turn it into it again. At this point, there's only 1 Grand Arbiter, and the silence does get countered, the Revel in Silence gets countered, but I still feel like I'm in a good spot to push. So continue to push through, land the Thoracle, land the Tainted Pact, and I win that game. Round 3 is another win, which is it's awesome. I feel pretty much locked at this point with 2 draws, or two wins and a draw. To get into top 4. There was no top 16 just because this was not that big of an event. But this pod is Chase on a Orzhov commander. I think it's Squall. It returns cards from the graveyard when it deals damage. I am in second seat on Farm. Ty is in third seat on Narset. And then Albert is in fourth seat on Blue Farm as well. Not playing Roxette this tournament. This game, I also have an early Tataru Taru, and I have a couple tutors in hand to get me to wherever I need to go. But the Tataru Taru, I think I mulled to 6, felt like a good enough start. I'm kind of relying on Blue Farm to draw cards and Ty to land a value engine. So I cast the Tataru Taru. Ty has a turn 1 fish. Albert develops a little bit of mana into a tutor. And then Chase develops into I think a 1 ring on turn 2. So my Tataru Taru is getting a pretty well fed. On turn 2, I cast a gamble to go get a Ristic Study. Ty missteps that. I'm like, all right, not the end of the world. We go around another turn cycle. Ty pays for his fish and plays a tapped land, Call the Bandit Lord to give Narset haste. Albert develops a Drannith Magistrate to stop me from developing my commanders, as well as to stop Ty from developing Narset and Chase from developing his commander. So I think it was a really strong play, actually. The Drannith looked good there. Chase draws his cards with the 1 ring, and then in his end step, I cast a Mystical Tutor. And I have a conversation with Albert because he has open mana at this point, and he's the only other blue player with open mana. And I'm like, I can get a wheel here. I can reset us all to parity. But if you don't have interaction, I'm going to get a Nas. And he's like, yeah, I do what you want to do. Like, and to me, that's kind of a sign to go. So I mystical tutor for Nas. I also have Revel and Silence in hand this game. And I go to my upkeep, or sorry, go to my turn, draw the Nas, and then cast Revel. No one has interaction for that, which is awesome. So that I Nas, and I'm able to get enough mana to bounce the Dranith and go into a breach line. So winning that was great, locked me for top 4. Top 4 is Jeremy Davis in seat 1. I'm in seat 2. Maddie is in seat 3 on Marnius Calgar. And then Sylvie is in seat 4 on Timna Dargo. So both of these players I have played a lot with and I'm good friends with, and I played them both in the last tournament. And so this was a little reenactment of that. Very different game though. So this is the first game where I snap kept a first 7. It was Volcanic Island, Gemstone Caverns, Mystical Tutor, Enlightened Tutor, Mindbreak Shop, Rhystic Study, and this is just the great hand. It's a turn 1 Rhystic Study. It's like an Enlightened Tutor for a Soul Ring. And it's a Mindbreak Trap to stop anyone from pushing early or in a concerted way. Jeremy ends up going for a turn 1 Smothering Tithe with land, Mana Vault, Lotus Petal, Tithe. I cast my Enlightened Tutor. Oh, I exiled my Mystical Tutor to my Gemstone Caverns. But I cast my Enlightened Tutor in response. That goes through, and then I Mindbreak Trap the Tithe. And that just was kind of the end of the game because I get my Rhystic Study, everyone develops, draws me a couple cards. Jeremy plays Spider Woman, the Blind Obedience creature, and then he gets a Dranith out at some point, and then I go to my turn. I have drawn Nas at this point. I've also drawn Offer and Misstep, but I have 5 mana, and I'm like, I don't think I need to do this now. I can just sit on my Rhystic Study. So I cast Crom, pass turn, draw a couple more cards. Jeremy develops his Dranith, I think, this turn, and then Sylvie develops a Timna before Jeremy, obviously. It starts to draw cards with DRC, and Maddie develops a One Ring. So people are getting back into the game a bit, but I'm still just so far ahead. Go to my turn, and I'm like, well, I can't cast Timna, which is what I say. I'm holding up Nas here, and whenever a blue farm player has 5 mana, you should expect them to have Nas in hand, just because it's kind of like a really obvious play pattern. And I just pass. I draw 1 or 2 more cards. They all kind of guess I have Nas, and I'm jokingly like, oh, I don't have Nas. I do. But I didn't want to, I'm not going to be like, no, I don't have it, or try and bluff. So I think I'm relatively clear that I have Nas in hand. And Sylvie tutors for interaction. Jeremy casts Essay and passes. End step, I Nas. No one has Counterspell, and I just hit a phenomenal Nas, all interaction, mana, and tutors. And I end up killing the Spider Woman on end step with Pyroblast. Go to my turn, play Cavern of Souls into a Voice of Victory. Sylvie reveals that she'd gotten a Soul Partition to deal with the Rhystic or the Dranith, so she could win on her turn. And I am able to just assemble like a pretty clean win from there. So that was the win. I got this pretty sick Badlands. It's my 3rd duel that I've won. I would love to be playing with these, but I do not have the money, so I'm selling them. If anyone wants a duel, a Badlands, let me know. But yeah, just super awesome to have some back-to-back tournament results in the beginning of the season. I'm currently sitting at number 5 right now overall in rankings, so glad to be up there. One thing that I am going to be doing, I would love anyone's input on this, is I would love to start looking at the top 10 of the leaderboard and kind of investigating what decks they're playing, tournaments they've won, and maybe even have some of them on the channel. You know, a lot of these names are people that, you know, I know, but I'm not sure if they're as well known to everyone else. So anyway, if people are interested in like a leaderboard breakdown every few weeks just to go over the top, 10 or top 20, I'd be happy to do that. So yeah, anyway, great couple weeks of Magic. Had a lot of fun playing, and just wanted to give you guys a quick tournament recap. Let me know if this is something that you guys want to see more of. We're really kind of experimenting with the channel right now and finding the content that we want to make and that people want to watch. So really open to input, and really appreciate all the support that everyone's been giving me. It's awesome, and I just couldn't be more thankful for everyone watching these videos and all the positivity I've received. So without further doubt, have a great day, and go play some Magic.